Well, good evening.
Oh, yeah.
I want to thank you all so much for coming tonight. Really appreciate the fact that you've taken some time out of your schedule to come and take part in a process that I believe is very important for the future of our community. The subject of our discussion tonight is one that has probably drawn as much public debate as any discussion we've had over the past decade. And through that entire discussion, I think few, if any, have debated that there is a real need that exists for addressing the condition of our municipal facilities that are provided for our police force, our municipal court system, and serve as the city hall function. In fact, we have never built facilities in this community for those functions. This building, of course, was originally built for the Mississippi National Guard. It was built through the WPA program in the Great Depression, and then the Mississippi National Guard used this building up until 1968. At that point in time, it was donated to the city. Since then, the police force, municipal court system, and city hall functions have grown into this facility. Well, much has changed since 1968. This city has changed dramatically since 1968. The population of the city of Starkville in 1968 was approximately 11,000. Of course, our census returns for 2010 came in just a few months ago. Our population is now officially 23,888. It is a much larger city. It is a much different city than it was in 1968. Our facilities for city services have grown to accommodate the city that we have become over the years. Since 1968, we have built 5 fire stations. We've built a facility to house the management of our electric department, the operation of our electric department. We've built facilities for our water department, our sanitation department, and our park service. We have never built facilities to accommodate the functions that are in this building. Those functions, as the city has grown, have grown and grown into this building. And there are consequences to that fact that we live with daily in this facility, that the community at large lives with daily in this facility. In some respects, this facility itself is a monument of hypocrisy. You see, the city is responsible for ensuring that any building built for public accommodation in this city meets the Americans with Disabilities Act and meets the city building code that the city has passed as law and enforces. When someone in the public seeks to open a building for public accommodation, ironically, they walk through the doors of this building to seek certification, and this building meets neither the ADA code nor the city building code. Beyond just the basic statement that's made in that alone, this city has many functional deficiencies that cause great issue in delivering city services. Most significantly, our police service and our court service. To give you an idea of just how cramped the police portion of this facility is, the police occupied 8,163 square feet of this facility. That is roughly the same footprint that they occupied when they moved into this building. In 1975, our police force had 18 sworn police officers. Today we have 53 sworn police officers. What has happened over the years is we have grown into that 8,163 square feet. Along the way, we have lost space essential to the public safety function. We used to have a crime lab. We no longer have a crime lab in the city of Starkville because it was converted to office space. We used to have a room for suspects and witnesses to be interviewed. We no longer have an interview room in our police department because it was converted to office space. When you come in to file a complaint, if you are the victim of a crime in this community, you go into the same room that somebody who is being accused of a crime is booked in a non-secure location, because there is simply no space to adequately perform each function independently. These are the consequences of the lack of space that defines our police facility. Now, our court system has changed a lot since the 1990s. The early 1990s is when you see a fairly dramatic change in the case volumes that municipal court was processing in the city of Starkville. Our court system currently has 2,632 feet in this building. That's about 27% of what they need. Now, the court system was much different in the early 90s. In the early 90s, they would hear about 3,600 cases a year. And what was required to staff that 3,600 cases was a very simple operation. Had a judge, a prosecutor, and a clerk. Well, last year, our municipal court processed 9,800 cases. What is necessary to hear and process those cases is a staff of 8 people. Again, growing into the same space, there are other requirements of the municipal court system that simply aren't here, such as a room for attorneys and clients to meet as a part of the court process. If an attorney wants to meet with a client, you do so in the hallway or you do so in the parking lot when you come to municipal court in the city of Starkville. That staff of 8 shares not only office space, but in some cases they share desk space. And our record storage, which long ago reached capacity for municipal court, has left us in the situation where our criminal records are stored not in the place that's most proper or most appropriate, but in a place simply where there is space to be found. All of these are significant issues for the way this city operates and the general service that the citizen in this community receives. Now, the Board of Alderman is to be commended for the way in which they have approached this process from the very beginning. A couple of years ago, at the outset of our term, we had a 2-day retreat where we all sat down and we began with the general topic of discussion: what will be necessary to make the city of Starkville all that it's capable of being? That was it. That was the general topic of discussion. And with respect to this project, the board did 2 things. First, they reached consensus on the notion that the failing condition of this facility as it currently is a threat to the well-being of this city both now and in the future. Second, they reached consensus on the notion that this is a problem that touches every single citizen in this community on a daily basis. And a problem such as this, of this magnitude, would require public guidance in finding a solution. Public guidance from beginning to end. And that's not easy to do. So much of the conversation at that retreat focused on how to establish a process by which the public could provide a solution. Well, the board established such a process, and they have executed that process over the last 18 months. The first stage was to appoint a committee from the board's membership. That committee was appointed. The second stage was to appoint a volunteer citizens committee. That group, along with an architectural consultant, would provide a recommendation for how the city could meet the pressing needs that are currently the situation we deal with this facility. That process wrapped up a couple of months ago. To the credit of a volunteer citizens committee that worked tirelessly over a 6-month period, we now have a recommendation that is practical and sound. Now, the reason we're here tonight is the next step in the board's process was to take that recommendation that was provided by the citizens group and determine what would be necessary to achieve that recommendation. Presenting it not in finished form, but as a preliminary concept for general, broader public feedback. After feedback is gathered tonight, the board will work to polish all that they've learned over the past 18 months into a final project ultimately to be submitted to the public. Now tonight, you'll hear presentations from 3 people, then we're going to have a panel discussion so we can get some feedback. First, you'll hear from Dr. Roy Ruby, who chaired our Citizens Committee and worked countless hours himself for no pay to not only corral the ideas and opinions of the committee, but to additionally seek public opinion and feedback outside of the committee process on the committee's work. He'll tell you about that process and what the committee ultimately recommended. Then Gary Schaefer is going to come forward. He's the architectural consultant that has worked with the committee on this project, and he will present to you in detail what exactly is required from a construction standpoint, from a budget standpoint, and from a time standpoint to achieve the recommendation that the committee has provided. The final presentation will be from Demery Grubbs. Demery Grubbs is acting as a financial consultant to the city on capital improvements. And I will say that Demery is thought of in municipal government circles as one of the foremost authorities on municipal budgeting and finance in the state of Mississippi. And he brings a lot to this project because he has financially managed and consulted on projects like this all over the state of Mississippi. He'll tell us a little bit about what our options are for financing the project that Gary lays out. Finally, after that's done, we'll hear from the presenters and the members of the board, municipal complex committee, as well as the police chief in a panel discussion. And perhaps I didn't frame that up exactly right. What we'll proceed to after that is you'll be invited to come forward to the podium and provide either comments or questions to interact with members of our panel. So with that said, Dr. Roy Ruby.
You said it was a volunteer committee. I'm not sure that was the correct word. Last year, the Mayor and Board of Alderman appointed a Citizens Committee whose charge was to recommend construction or renovation to provide adequate facilities for the effective and efficient operation of city government for the present and 15 to 20 years in the future. This effort was necessary due to the totally inadequate facilities which city government currently occupies. These facilities are so bad that public safety is compromised by the insufficient quarters occupied by the police, while justice is strained by the equally bad city court situation. There is no disagreement, I don't think, about the need for adequate facilities, but in the past there has not been sufficient agreement amongst the citizens of Starkville about how to solve the problem. The committee was composed of 9 members representing various constituencies of the population of the city. The committee included a business executive, a media production company manager, a professor of public administration at the university, a retired city engineer, a graduate student, a professor of engineering at the university, a retired public school principal, and a retired automobile industry worker who retired back to his hometown, Starkville. And we worked, as he said, with a local architect who was employed by the city, Gary Schaefer. Besides recommending adequate facilities, the committee agreed that 2 other principles would guide their efforts. First, the cost would be a prime consideration in all facility recommendations, that the committee would only advocate facilities that could be provided as economically as practical. And secondly, to try to get as much citizen input as possible To that end, all meetings of the committee were open to the public and the press, except those that involved the discussion of the possible purchase of property. There was open houses here at the City Hall with the opportunity for people to view the facilities and with give written input as to what ought to be done. And then the individual committee members met with groups as requested, and then, of course, tonight's effort to get more citizens' input. The committee first met in September 2010 and met every 2 weeks with some additional meetings through April of 2011. Additionally, we met with the charrette group that was here and shared our information, and they shared their input also. We submitted our recommendation to the Mayor and Board of Alderman May the 3rd, 2011. Many options were considered because the committee had no preconceived notion about the final recommendation. Every past proposal from previous efforts was considered, as well as all new possibilities that have arisen since these past efforts. Any vacant building or available property that we knew about was considered, and if not accepted, was due to some deficiency that kept it from meeting the needs. Our recommendation was this. We recommended to accommodate the city court, the building department, the personnel office, the public service director's office, and the city engineer's office that this facility, the old City Hall building, the old National Guard building, be renovated. The advantages of this is that the building is believed to be very structurally sound. It basically has 4 walls that are very on the outside, and inside it's basically there are no wall-bearing walls, so that it can be gutted and can be arranged as needed to accommodate these functions. Obviously, you know that renovation is much less expensive than new construction, was certainly a driving force in this decision. We obviously wanted to use whatever facilities that the city already owned wherever possible. There's not quite enough square footage in the building to accommodate all of those services, along with the mayor's office and the city clerk's office, and we recommended that an addition be placed in a small addition in the parking lot west of this facility where you currently have your police cars parked. To accommodate the police department, the committee recommends that property for sale at the corner of Northwest Jackson Street and 182 be purchased, and a new building specifically to meet police needs be built there. There's plenty of room on that property for the visitors parking, as well as secured parking for police cars, and also has avenues of egress for police cars to access all areas of the city. It has the additional benefit of adding to the improvement of 182 through the city. This is not going to be a Taj Mahal building, but a very attractive building that will allow the police to do their job in an efficient and effective manner. This is the recommendation of the Citizens Committee, which we turned over to and left in the hands of the Mayor and Board of Aldermen on May the 3rd.
Take me 30 seconds to warm up, I believe. We did lights just a little more, or is it all or nothing?
All or nothing.
All or nothing.
It's
And
in
this
sections,
looks
Gary. I'll
perfect.
run it. I'll do it.
Dr. Ruby, thank you.
Thank you, Gary.
The members of the committee are listed, and the board members work very well also as part of this project. As we remember, we have been through this project a few times as a community. I believe this will be our 4th rendition so far, and we'll see how this goes. Very good. All good buildings, I believe, the solution comes from one of 2 areas, from both areas. from the program, in other words, the user, and then also the site. And so, in this case, to establish the user, we have three users: the police, the city hall, and the courts. And so if anybody ever asks you, it's an easy proportion to remember. The police need about 30,000 square feet, the city hall needs about 20,000 square feet, and the court needs about 10,000. So 3, 2, 1, and that's the size. And this existing building has about 20,000 square feet. So you see, we can't fit all of those in this in terms of the needs. And these are the needs that are generated for our current staff, and also projecting 15 to 20 years into the future. And so this program was written by Brinkley Sargent as the first go around, and then my office wrote the program for the courts. As Dr. Ruby suggested, we had two sites that we were looking at to solve the problem of our three functions. And so the first site is on the corner of North Jackson and Highway 182. And it was made up sort of as three pieces or three parcels of property that would be available. And for those of you familiar with that site, it appears to be reasonably flat. But as you get back up, when you start to think that fraternity house is really up on a hill. And so I think we can all appreciate the hill that this site has. But the thing that's most amazing, where all those trees are just past Lafayette, in fact, has a 20-foot gorge down in there. We have our own little Grand Canyon that we didn't know we had. So in fact, there's a 35-foot elevation change from that to that. So it was a bit of a complicated site, but I think what you'll see has worked out well. The proposal is that we would locate the police facility on the corner of that intersection. The idea being that in the future, this will become a north entry to the city of Starkville. And so this will become an important building to help to start to send, I believe, an image that we want as a community as to what our public services are, and speaks well to the city of Starkville. Now, the building will also come out to the edge, essentially, because it is more of an urban building, just like our downtown building. So we will be maintaining the texture of our downtown. As you go down Highway 182, you realize there is a bit of a drop in elevation. We're suggesting to create an intersection now. Right now, Lafayette dead ends into 182. We'll create an intersection with a light, which would then allow much easier access for the public to get in and out, because you know before and after school, this becomes a busy intersection. But that would allow not only the public access, which would be in this lot, but also would allow access to the secure area for the police. And of course, it's extremely important that we're able to get out of this at least two ways. So this secure parking would also have an exit out onto North Jackson. So these are both considered 5-lane. I lost my cheat. 5-lane exits onto these two streets. So extremely important. Now, the other thing that has developed over the years is, as the mayor talked about, the importance of meeting our own codes. We now need to meet the notion of water detention that comes onto our site. We just can't push it out. Well, fortunately, as it flows downhill, we have this wonderful hole that we can put it in. And once it is filled with water, it will be no longer a hole, it will be a water feature. And we will be able to handle our water runoff, but this gives us the opportunity to take a problem and turn it into a solution. And we are hoping that we would be able to also make a green space in the downtown, which is something that also has been discussed by a number of different groups and committees. So the combination of these three sites would allow us to have the square footage that we need for the police, public entrance on this corner, the secure entrance on this side, and then the public parking would, of course, be there for the police, but we would also have additional public parking in the downtown and adjacent to the green space. So that is the recommendation for that site. And just a quick little sketch image of how we could turn the corner. We would still soften that elevation with landscaping, but we would have a two-story building that would be open and speak, I think, well to the corner and well to our image that we want for Starkville. The second part of the project, and again, the complication when you're doing these projects is you just can't shut these buildings, government buildings, down for 1, 2, 3, 4 years while you're building. So the notion would be that we would build the police building first. And when that was done, then the police would be able to move out and we would have space in this building to start a renovation project. So the second part of the committee's recommendation is that we work with the site that we currently own and that we're occupying right now. And the suggestion would be, as you saw in the program, we don't have enough square footage in this building to accommodate the needs for City Hall and also for the courts. So we're suggesting an addition would be placed on this building and then the renovation of this building. And the sequencing would allow us to put this addition on, and you'll see in a minute that this is a two-story addition. And then we could move our city services into that building, and we have a little bit of extra square footage in the electric building. We'll have a little bit of extra square footage in the police, and as a sort of extra space, we still have the old electric building. So we feel like we can accommodate all of the city's needs for a temporary situation in city-owned buildings. So we wouldn't have to lease space or go out for additional costs then. The other thing that we would suggest is that we would improve the parking lot that is down beside the farmer's market, and we would make a correct and proper access from that parking in terms of ADA entrances and access to this building, so the downtown would become much more accessible as part of the renovation of this City Hall building. I talked to some folks before we started. We're so fortunate. We have the original drawings of this building, and they're gorgeous and they're fun to look at. And it was a grand old building, and you could see it had wonderful detail, these great little flagpoles. And so when we talk about the bones of the building, it had a great image, and it has a great space. We just can't see it right now, but the bow trusses are still above us. There's a gorgeous open space that we just can't see. So our notion is that we would certainly respect the qualities of this original building, and when we add to it, we would put a building that would be similar in qualities. This would show you how we would accomplish this. As I said, we would put a two-story addition, a two-story annex onto this building, and that would eventually become the mayor and city clerk. So you would enter this building as City Hall. And then this building, the existing building, we would resolve the problem that we have at entry. The thing that's interesting is the sidewalk and where we are standing right now are at the same elevation. You just have to go up to get back down here. So we would be able to eliminate that up and down, and you would just come in that front door, and then at the end of that hall, we just want to scoot this cord over and perfectly line it up at the end of the hall, that then we would be able to open this building all the way up and see those bow trusses And our court space then not only would be the correct size that we need, but it wouldn't be this small, low, less than grand space. It would be a beautiful court space that was of the original building. And so we're very fortunate to have that when we reuse this building. So this whole first floor now would become the court. The court would be in the middle. We would have the court administration on one side, the court lobby, so we would have plenty of secure waiting area for people coming and going for what they need. And then also the green is the judge and prosecutor. And that area would be very secure and private to be able to get them in and out without having to come through the court at all. So the court takes this floor, and then we would still use the existing first floor where the city clerk and the police are. But as you can see, we would have to start to introduce elevator and lift systems to meet all of our ADA needs and requirements. So we would use that space, and we would also be able to still use that wonderful little space that's on top of the entrance. But we need additional space, so we're suggesting that we would put a second floor in this building, but that second floor would wrap around the court space. So it wouldn't compromise the quality of the court space, but it also would connect to the second floor of our annex. So all of the new construction and the renovated construction would all be at the same level then. And so I think we would have the best of both worlds. We would really have a building, an existing building that we were proud of, and we would have a new building that solved our functional needs, and this would phase out in a way that would work well. So again, a quick little sketch. This is the existing building. What we're proposing is putting in the missing piece. That's the only hole in this downtown block right now. And so we would fill that with a building that would still have the character of the existing building, but now we would have a city hall image here, and we would have a court image here, and we would have the police image over at the corner. So we now have 3 public buildings in terms of how the city sees us. There's a price tag associated with all this. And so right now, the cost estimate has for the new police, the entire project, which is this project from edge to edge, including the cost of the land, we're at $8.3 million. And then the next phase would be the city hall and the renovation of this building, renovation and addition, and we're at $5.85 million. And the time schedule to accomplish this, let's just say, for a starting point, we started the planning and design process in October of 2011. 9 months later, we would have a bid opening and begin construction. And a year after that, so July of 2013, we would expect to have the police facility ready. We would then move over, and then we would start the same process for this building. But the difference is that we would start that in April. We would look by, we would start immediately in July. In April, we would take bids of 14. January of 2015, we would have the annex completed. So we would move over, and then basically, we would take a year then to finish the rest of this renovation. So we would look at kind of this process of phasing between now and January of 2016. Shall I go ahead and turn this on?
Oh, yeah, you can turn it on. Turn the lights on. I think, can everybody hear me okay? My wife says I can't
Can't see your
whisper.
board.
Well,
Could you put it back further?
well, I can put it, it won't go any further back. It comes to the table. Is that
Oh,
okay?
I'm sorry.
You want to move the podium? Let me move this podium out of the way here. For right now.
Brings it back.
Good show.
do the project for the public safety complex. I've rounded these up a little bit, 8.3 million for the public safety, or I use the word public safety because we do this a lot in other places. 8.3 million, City Hall about 5.9 is a rounding factor to get this to the rounded basis. About $14.2 million worth of financial needs that we're talking about here tonight. Question is, how do we fund these needs? That's always the question, is how do you go about paying for it? It's just like you at the house, something comes up, you're going to concern how you pay for it. One of the things I'll say though, in municipal government, county government, state government, school systems, wherever you are, people say, well, why do you need to borrow money? Why is it necessary to issue bonds or to borrow money? I dare say if I asked a question in here, how many of you paid for your house in cash the day you bought it? Most of you are not going to raise your hands. The vast majority of you are going to spread that cost over time and pay for it where you can manage it within your budget. It's no different for a city or a county or local government or a school system. You don't pay for things in cash. First of all, we're pretty much restricted by law as to what we can and we can't do. So we spread things over time, so one segment of your community is not paying for this in a short period of time, whereas a facility like a police facility, a city hall, is going to be used by people for years. So you're going to spread it out so everybody can share in the cost of the services that are provided within the municipality. It's no different here, and that's what we try to do here. First of all, the city's got to comply with state law. We don't have any option. The city does not have the ability to go down to the bank and say, I need this much money, and this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to do it. Cities are nothing more than elements of state government. We are dictated by state law. We can only borrow money, do financial functions within a municipality and or a county based upon what the state law allows us to do. We can't make our rules up and decide we want to do this day or that day. We just have to comply with the law, just like you have to. What do? The first thing we do is we start looking at our current debt. Yes, ma'am.
I'm sorry, am I the only one that doesn't know who you are?
You must have got here late. They introduced me with a glowing introduction.
I'm so sorry.
I'm sorry. I'm Demery Grubbs. I'm with Government Consultants out of Jackson, Mississippi. My background is I spent 3 terms as the mayor of Vicksburg, Mississippi. I spent 2 years at the Mississippi Municipal League as an assistant director of the Mississippi Municipal League, working with cities around the state. And for the last 21 years, I've been a financial consultant advisor. Now, I don't look that old, but I've been working that long. But anyway, first thing we got to do is we got to look at your current debt situation. What do you owe now? What do you have on your books? What are you paying off? And then we got to turn around and look at what is your capacity to borrow money. Municipalities, as I stated to you a little bit earlier, are dictated by law as to what we can do. And so we have to look at our capacity. Now, one of the things we look at is general obligation capacity. By state law, a municipality can only borrow up to 15% of its assessed value. Your assessed value here is about $208 million. So your capacity, total capacity, is about $31 million too. That's what you can borrow. Now this is a moving target. Each year as your assessed value goes up, your capacity goes up. If your assessed value goes down, your capacity goes down. But we're dictated by law, we're at 15% of your assessed value. Your current debt's approximately $12.1 million. Is what you owe in general obligation debt. And that's general obligation debt is secured by the full faith and credit of the city and your taxes. And you have some other debt that aren't GO debt. And that's like electrical department debt, water and sewer debt. Those debts are paid by the water and sewer funds that are collected by your fees, your electrical charges, things of this nature. But when you start looking at what you can use, a tool that you can use to build a public facility, you would have to do it under this structure, under GO structure. So you have about $12 million out there right now, so that leaves you a future capacity of around $19 million. You say, oh boy, we got $19 million, we got $14.2 million worth of project, we got it made. Well, that's not necessarily true. I tell people all the time, don't spend all your money. You've heard that old rainy day fund scenario. Keep some there all the time and keep yourself safe. I recommend that municipalities keep about 20% of their capacity at all times. Who knows if a tornado's gonna come through here and cause a major catastrophe? I don't recommend cities use all their capacity. What you do is leave yourself some flexibility here, where if you had to and had an emergency situation, you can utilize it. So, let's take $6 million and let's set it aside, and that's our rainy day debt capacity. It's not rainy day money you have, but it's at least capacity you can go use if you need to. Well, if you take that $6 million from the 19, we're down to about $13 million. We're outside $14.2 million under GO debt, or general obligation bonds. There are other ways to do this, and let's talk about what we can do. $14.2 million worth of needs, $13 million of capacity. Can only do part of the project under GO bonds. In other words, we got to decide which one of these we're going to do under a GO bond and what other mechanisms are out there to utilize. So, what my thinking is, the recommendation is that the public safety be done in the process of general obligation bonds. Under the general obligation bond laws of the state of Mississippi, you basically do public improvements such as public buildings, streets, recreation, any of those type public improvements, not counting water, sewer, things of this nature. They're considered revenue bonds. But we can do public buildings under the statute, and we think that what you should look at is probably doing the public safety complex about $8.3 million. That leaves you about $4.8 million down here to borrow for other purposes, not your emergency fund. But if you take that $6 million and the $4 million, you got about $10 million left in that capacity category. One of the things that I tell cities all the time, don't put all your eggs in one basket. If we tried to borrow it all here, and we put it all in public buildings, y'all got some streets you like to ride on occasionally, and you might have to have some improvements along streets, so we want to leave ourselves some capacity. The other thing this does is we're going to be paying debt off as we go along too, so we'll be building this back up. But my recommendation is you look at that $8.3 million in a general obligation bond to pay for it, and I'll get into that just a little bit more in just a second. The next thing is you look at your city hall complex and city hall renovation. And I've put a couple of things down here. There are other loan mechanisms in the state. One is called a COP, Certificate of Participation. It's a lease financing type structure where you go in, create a public improvements district. It's not going to get into all the details of that, but basically what you do is you structure this building in such a way that you have a public improvements corporation that has a temporary title, and what you do is you turn around, borrow notes, and you pay those notes back to match the lease back to the building. It's called Certificate of Participation. It is not count against your debt limit. It's outside the debt limit. You have to identify the sources of funds you're going to pay it with, but it's not a full faith and credit type tax pledge. You also have the Mississippi Development Bank. It's a loan structure that was created back in 1986 for cities, counties, schools, colleges, universities, and public bodies that wanted to borrow money. And it gave you an ability to go through the bank, identify the source in which you're going to pay that back, and utilize the Mississippi Development Bank. Now let me talk about these two here just a little bit. If we were over here, and I'm going to talk about them and the GO together so you see the difference. GO, when we do a GO, we can go up to 20 years, and that's the max. we can issue for any time under that. And we do a GO, it's structured. By law, we have to pay pretty much a certain amount of principal and interest each year. And that's dictated by state law. We can't play with that very often. We got to go under that rule, under the GO. Under the COP program, as well as the Mississippi Development Bank, what we can do is we can adjust that and adjust the schedule in such a way that we can play with the principal amounts and schedule it in such a way that best meets our budget and pay it off over a longer period of time. We're not locked into 20 years. We could actually get into these and do 23 or 24 or 25 years. And we could adjust those schedules, and we've done this a lot where we see a facility that needs to adjust its cash flow. I've done some stuff in northern Mississippi, up in the DeSoto County area, where we've done the development bank issues, where we structured the payments back based on their growth. And as their assessed value grows, we're able to pay that debt back, and we can adjust that debt accordingly. So we got two areas here to work with. My recommendation is that you look at the GO bond, and you do your police station under the GO bond. We've got time under the City Hall complex to adjust to one of these other mechanisms, and we hadn't have to jump up today and lock ourselves in on that. The other problem, if we do go under the GO bond, let's do a hypothetical. We borrowed all the money for the police station and City Hall. When you borrow money, you've got to spend it in 3 years. So if we borrowed it all, we couldn't do it in 3 years. We'd be in violation of IRS regs. So it'd be hard for us to do. So we got to be realistic. We got to spend it if we can. Now we can borrow all the money on the police complex, spend it within a 3-year time frame that the law says we have to, and we can get it done. Now some of you are asking, now Demery, you're doing a lot of talking about how much that's going to cost me. You know, somebody's going to say, well, I've got to figure out how much is this going to cost. One of the things we do is we go back and we look at your current debt. You remember I talked a while ago about current debt that you have. If we did this $8 million bond issue, we basically are going to have, on today's market, and the one thing I always have a caveat to folks, if I knew what the market was going to be 6 months from now, y'all would be listening to me on a TV screen and I'd be on my island somewhere talking to you. So we don't know what the market's going to do on a given day. But based on the current day market, and with me fudging a little bit, putting a little higher interest rate on it, basically the payment on an $8 million complex is going to be about $640,000 a year. Now, that's ballpark of what it's going to be. That's an annual P&I. That's your principal and interest payment for a year. That's your total annual payment. So you're saying, well, how much is that going to cost in millage? Now, 1 mil of tax in this city generates about $180,000. Now your assessed value is $208,000. You're going to say, Denver, wait a minute, we ought to be collecting $200,000. There's such an item as homestead exemption, things of this nature that you don't pay. So we get back to what do we really collect 1 mil of tax. It's about $180,000. So if that's $180,000, we're going to divide this here into this, and we're going to come up with 3.56 mils of tax to retire that debt. If we just throw it out there, that's what it's going to take. Well, let me show you a little trick we can do. You've got a $640,000 debt. And Marquita's sitting in here, the city clerk, and I got a list of all the debt. And guess what happens next year? 2012, we got a debt that rolls off. About $190,000 a year payment. So, let's subtract that $190,000 payment. Because we already got it, it's already in your books, you're already paying taxes on it, let's just leave it there. Let's just leave it there. So now, what we're gonna pay, instead of 3 point, is 2.5 mils of tax, taking advantage of that bond issue that's rolling off next year. And it's gonna be rolling off, it's already in your taxes, it's already on the book, let's take advantage of it. Why go out here and stick you with 3.5 mils of tax? So, 2.5 mils of tax is what I think we're looking at in the ballpark. Well, you said, that's all good, then, but what about my house? All right, $75,000 home. I'm gonna do a $100,000 home and a $150,000 home. Okay, what I see in the state of Mississippi, pretty much standard when I go around the state, is most of our houses in this state on an average basis are gonna fall somewhere around that 100,000 range or less on an average. Now, some of them are gonna be more, some of them are gonna be less. But if you took all your houses in your city, you got to come up with some kind of average. Okay, if we do this, this is what your annual payment will be for $75,000 is $18.75 a year. Or $1.50 a month. And if you want to go all the way out to a day, it's going to cost you 5 cents. That's on a $75,000 house. On a $100,000 house, it's going to cost you $25 a year. On a monthly basis, it's going to cost you about $2.08 approximately, and or about 7 cents a day. And on a $150,000 house, it's going to be about $37.50 a year. Bottom line, about $3.13 a month. And then it's going to cost you about 10 cents a day. If you're looking at what the impact is to you if that tax had to go on. If the assessed value of the city goes up, and I'm using this value based on the current mill. Let's say next year your values go up, you've increased